Hello, my name is Shannon Hansen. I'm doing this recording for a friend of mine for some coursework, but I figured perhaps I might upload it so in the off chance that it might be helpful for others. The first thing I'd like to say is that I'm a transgender female, meaning that I was born male and now identify as female. I grew up in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and for those who don't know, Idaho Falls is a somewhat of a conservative community. Um, Most of the folks there are LDS Mormons. And growing up in a conservative community and a community that prizes conformity kind of shaped my existence as a young child. My family was not LDS, but the community definitely had an impact on my childhood. With that being said, I spent my whole childhood through high school in Idaho Falls. I graduated as one of a handful of valedictorians at Skyline High School. I later moved to the University of Idaho, where I studied electrical engineering and graduated in 2004, summa cum laude, with my bachelor's in electrical engineering. Upon graduation, I moved down to Boise and started at Micron Technology in 2004. I got married also in 2004 to my high school sweetheart. We both met in high school and then went to college together. And in 2006, we had our first and only child, a son. And I've been working at Micron almost 15 years. I did a few summer internships before I graduated. And I'm currently working as a principal engineer, but I've moved up through the ranks. Started as a sort of a staff level engineer, moved to a senior level engineer, and now I'm a principal engineer. I'm currently working on NAND flash technology, which for those who don't know is the type of storage that's in your digital camera or your cell phone. So the main focus of this video is obviously my experience being a transgender female. So a question that a lot of people ask is, when did you know? When did you know you were transgender? It's kind of a complex thing, at least in my experience, to completely put my finger on it and say, I should have been a woman. One of the other things that's pretty common is people will ask, how was it to be trapped in the wrong body? I never felt like I was trapped in the wrong body. This is my body. It's the same body I've had all my life. I never felt trapped in it. With that being said, I knew at a reasonably young age that there was something different about me. And I think I really put my finger on it as a teenager going through puberty. But looking back, there are signs that I was different all along. I like to play house with my friends rather than things that boys would normally play. I liked girls' clothing, although I was too afraid to delve into that. So one of the things about being in a community and knowing that you're different, and knowing that people wouldn't accept you for who you are, causes a lot of repressed feelings or guilt or shame about your behavior, or why can't I be like everybody else. So it was a pretty tough time being a teenager. There was nobody, as far as I knew, in my family who even knew that this was going on with me. I kept it locked up. So there were behaviors in high school and through my youth and on into college. I would dress in secret. I would paint my toenails. There were a couple times that I thought my mom would catch me with painted toes, and I would hurry home or hurry upstairs and take the nail polish off. But doing little things like that, little feminine things, were sort of a way to scratch an itch, if you will, to sort of access a part of my personality that I'd been hiding. And for the longest time, little things were enough to make it go away, or at least allow me to push it back and go on living as a male. But over time, it got harder and harder. Once I graduated and moved on and got a career, this thing didn't go away. I tried very hard. Um, so I began to sort of accept it about myself, and I would set aside time. And my wife began to know. We started to kind of talk about bits and pieces of it, although I don't think she ever knew all of it. But I would set aside days, or even, she would take the child, my son, and I would spend a few hours being able to dress, and then she would come home, and I would be back in male mode, and it was no big thing. And for a long time, like I said, uh, I was able to scratch that itch, and then for a week or month or sometimes many months, I would never have to do it. Um, but all along, behaving that way caused a lot of guilt and shame. And talking with friends who are like me, that shame component is what drives a lot of unfortunate things for transgender people. Keeping things locked away, and having to feel terrible about a behavior that you can't control is pretty harmful. My spouse and I, at one point, decided to try counseling. I think her employer offered a handful of free counseling sessions, so we tried to do marriage counseling, and really the point of it was to talk about my cross-dressing at the time, and how it related to our relationships, and what we could do. So I think it was maybe 2007, 2008. We decided to go to a counselor, and that experience left a very bad taste in my mouth as far as counselors, therapists are concerned. This gal, within moments of talking to us, concluded that there was something wrong with me, and that it was something that could be fixed. She was into homeopathy, and thought she could prescribe me a handful of magic herbs or pills or beans or who knows what, and that I could be cured. For a brief point in time, my wife took solace in that information that the counselor provided, and really thought there might be some sort of cure, or something that we could do to ease this feeling and make me not behave this way. I, of course, knew in my heart that there was no way there was a magic way to make this stop. As much as I wanted it to stop, I knew that that wasn't true. So from then on, in the mid 2000s, up until very recently, I was not interested in going to counseling or telling anyone else about this. And again, it's one of those things where I had a bad experience, more shame, more guilt, more hiding. And then in October of 2014, there was a close family member of mine, one of my in-laws. He had struggled with depression for quite a long time, and also struggled with alcoholism, and he took his own life. And for whatever reason, that sort of triggered me to think, I got to do something about this. I can't live like this anymore. There were signs and behaviors of alcoholism in myself, destructive behavior, and in 2014 I decided I'm going to try and find a counselor, and hopefully they don't try to fix me. And at the time, my main focus wasn't necessarily on transitioning or being transgender, although it was certainly a component of my life that I wanted to understand and figure out how to manage. So I'll get to it in a few minutes. I'll talk a little bit more about my experience with my counselor, but as far as I'm concerned, she saved my life. So I'm very grateful for the step that I made to go to counseling, and I'm thankful for all the work that we've done together and all the support I've received from her. So as far as my transition goes, I started on hormones, hormone replacement therapy. So for a male to female, we take estrogen basically, and then we have to block testosterone. Testosterone is a very strong hormone and androgen, and you can take as much estrogen as you want, but testosterone always wins. We have to block testosterone with these magical pills, and then there's a handful of ways that you can take estrogen. I've taken pills. There are some people who do transdermal patches on your skin. But what I've moved on to, and what seems to work well for me, are hormone injections. I do them weekly. no fun at all. But it's nice because I do it just once a week. So in order to get hormones, you have to generally have a note from a therapist. So my therapist helped me with that as well. I lived part-time for a few months in early 2015, and it was sort of at work I lived as my old name, and outside of work I lived as Shannon. That, coupled with all the years of anguish and hiding this from my wife, and the fact that she wasn't attracted to women and wasn't okay with me transitioning, led her to move out in early July of 2015. I had kind of been working towards a plan to transition maybe the end of the year of 2015, but the stress of living a double life and then not having my wife living with me anymore was like, why am I hanging on to this? Why don't I just do it? So I came out on July 21st of 2015 to my friends and all of my coworkers. There were a handful of people along the way who knew. And I've been living full-time ever since. My career, my employer and my coworkers have been reasonably accepting, which was a big fear of mine. There have been a handful of little issues, stuff surrounding the restroom, but nothing major to speak of. So I'm very fortunate for that. So on to some of the challenging things, the not so pretty things. The stress of losing my marriage and losing daily access to my son, or having to have shared custody and limited custody, along with impending financial losses of a divorce, and losing who I was, and sort of the gravity of all that, on top of the stress of coming out and transitioning at work, caused a lot of depression. And I worked with my counselor, and we worked through some of that, and I ended up getting on antidepressants. Along the way, my struggles with alcohol got much more severe. And then I also struggled with suicidal thoughts and a couple of pretty scary brushes with suicide. Fortunately, I stopped drinking. I kept working through counseling. I met tons of people in the transgender community, and I really, really struggled hard to find a way to cope with who I was and what was happening to me. As life sort of steadied or stabilized after my divorce, and things with my son, my family, kind of got to routine, things have really started to improve. I took about a 6-month break from alcohol, and I think that was a huge benefit for me. But I think that the most important thing for me to go through all this was absolutely having a counselor, a therapist, who was supportive and someone that I could bounce ideas off of. So my personal counselor, she's amazing. I selected her just sort of out of the blue based on my insurance policy at work, and she had listed that she was LGBT friendly. But I think a lot of people just know what the acronym is and think that it's basically lesbians and gays, and the buck kind of stops there. So she admitted to me early on in our sessions that she wasn't all that familiar with transgender issues, but that she was still comfortable working with me. And it's actually been a fun experience working with her. We've both learned a lot about being trans. I researched the heck out of it being an engineer, but it's one thing to research it, and it's a very different thing to live it. And she was willing to learn, and it was obvious that over time, she was really starting to understand the situation that I was in and the situation of people like me. She was doing research sort of on the side, I believe. So as far as counselors go, at least for me, what was helpful was someone who was obviously open-minded and didn't have a conflict of interest or faith, but also someone who was willing to learn and willing to laugh about some of the silly things. There's crazy stuff that happens, being, we like to refer to ourselves as unicorns, or just being something so different and out of the ordinary for people. There are situations that arise that are pretty unique. So having someone who can laugh about that stuff and sort of take a lighthearted approach to it sometimes was very helpful. And one thing that I didn't expect, but what I've realized about counseling is that many people go through tremendous struggles in their lives. And yes, there are things about being transgender that are very unique to that experience and sometimes very complicated. But in the end, it's just a major struggle. This transition that I've gone through is a major struggle that, people go through divorces and big changes in career or big changes in defining who they really are. And so my counselor being able to boil everything down and really kind of use the tools that she already had and has been working with other clients for years and years on, things like, ways to just have healthy behaviors or responses to things and techniques to navigate difficult times, really kind of apply no matter what, not just for transgender stuff. So her ability to kind of translate that, if you will, into my experience was helpful. One of the things she said to me that was really powerful was, you're going through a tough time, but it doesn't last. Your body won't let you live in chaos forever. Although I thought that I was going to live in chaos forever, things have gotten so much better. And the freedom of being myself has been huge. I've had people tell me, you used to be so angry and now you're genuinely happy. And I think that makes it worth it. So I'll just leave you all with kind of some final thoughts. The thing that I hope most people take away is that transgender people are people first, and while we may have this thing about us that makes us unique, we're still people, we're still humans, we still have emotions, we still have jobs and do boring things like sit around and watch Netflix for hours on end. There's a lot of what we call trans panic going around. A lot of legislation, especially back east, regarding non-discrimination, and specifically there's this fear of transgender women like me using the restroom with your wife or your children or your daughter. And it seems to be kind of something that's being drummed up in response to the Supreme Court passing gay marriage, sort of a last-ditch effort. And the techniques that people use are pretty, they stir people up emotionally, and especially if people don't know much about trans issues or have never known a trans person. There's this fear and this stigma that all trans people are deviants, sexual predators. I promise you that, at least in my experience, I wouldn't go through all this torture, lose so much, almost lose my life, have to go through all the physical changes and pain and medical procedures just so that I could sneak into the restroom of a different gender. I just want to go in the restroom and do what people do in the restroom and leave. And it's pretty hurtful to see that people treat us the way that we do and treat us as a deviant or something to fear. We're not anything to fear. So that's what I just want to leave you with, that I'm a normal person. I do crazy, goofy things. And I'm so much happier and better off for living as my true self. Anyway, I hope this is helpful. Thank you so much. And if you want, leave comments, and I'll try and take a look at them. Good evening.